So this video has been cooking in my spirit for years, maybe 3 or 4 years so far. It's something I've always considered and thought about and talked about, with anybody who would entertain it. But it's about the mystery of time and God standing outside of time, being the one who molds time and speaks in the language of one who sits outside of this thing called that we call time. And we see it in a very linear way. And some say, oh, it's circular. Some say it's, whatever. But I'm thinking that, like in the book of Revelation 21, where it speaks on the measurement of New Jerusalem. Now, New Jerusalem comes down from heaven, and apparently it's kind of like a square or a cube or something. And it's measured. But we're talking about New Jerusalem being heaven. We're talking about a thing, a place, a dimension that's forever, but the edges of it are measurable. So that's what I'm going to talk about here in this video. Is I was watching the Lessons from the Time of Nero by Eric Ludy, Pastor Eric Ludy. It's an incredible series. I think it's one of his best, but that's saying a lot because a lot of his series are awesome. He really does make an effort to show that he's not trying to tell you anything. He's just explaining, like, let's sit back from a place of fresh eyes, new beginnings. Let's not have a built-in eschatology in which people tell you that this is definitely what it is and how it works. Because there's something about being absolute about eschatology that doesn't make sense, because it's coming from a place of being a god or being gods or being the God, that it's just not possible. There's no way we could fully understand what God speaks fluently in the Bible. He's painting a picture. He's telling us something, and he's speaking on it in a way that, of course, is over our head. But I'll tell you what I've seen. I'll tell you the way in which I've experienced in my own life certain ideas about time that are confirmed in the Bible and have been confirmed several times throughout my life. That's what this video is about. This isn't about me telling you what to believe about time. This is about being in awe of a God who has control of such a thing. And allowing time to be a mystery is an art in itself. It's its own discipline. It allows for so much more faith to creep in when you don't put the idea of God's abilities with his ability to work all things for the good of those who are called to his purpose in a box. Because that's what you do. When you say you understand how eschatology works, what you're saying is you understand time and the way in which he created it and the way in which he's explaining it, which I don't think we do. And I'll just give a few examples. So I have a few books stacked up here, okay? And we'll say the first book that's stacked up is 20 years, okay? The next book is 30 years. The next book is 40 years. The next book is a lifetime. And the last one is maybe 15 years or so. Now, these are all different people in their lives. So somebody's alive for 100 years. That's the thickest book. The one at the bottom, that one person was alive for 15 years. And you can see, relatively speaking, how much time these people have existed on Earth. Now, if you were to, this is just a side angle of these lives that are stacked on top of each other, right? If you were to take people's lives and stack up that time frame, you would see the width of time that they've been alive. You can kind of see it visually. But then you look from a different angle, from the above angle, and you can see one of those books stick out more than the other. Right? So if you were to take the top of where those books exist, the top of those books, that's where God created the beginning and the earth, right? That's the beginnings. And at the very bottom, where it says the author's name, right where the books end, at the very bottom of the book, that's where Jesus returns, right? And if you see where that blue book at the bottom sticks out, that was where the 15-year-old person had 5 years extended to their life. But yet, they're meeting Jesus at the bottom of the book at the end of time in the same place. And so there's a lot of things where Jesus is walking around and talking casually and just living out stuff where he's telling you complicated, very big idea. He's just breathing it. It's just too complicated for us. So you could see this in Lazarus rising from the dead. His timeline continued. He died. And what a lot of people don't talk about was that Lazarus lived a life outside of his death. Like, he died for 4 days. and then he was risen, and then he lived his life. Like, he just continued living. And he was chilling with Jesus, talking to Jesus. He watched Jesus die on a cross. Like, I don't know if he was there very specifically, I can't say, but I'm just saying, like, his family got him back. What is God saying? What is Jesus saying? I've had spiritual confirmation, things that happened that were too much of a coincidence, where God made it clear, I'm going to open a door. This person's going to walk through it, and I'm going to walk through this alone with them. Like, they are going to be alone with me, meaning you won't be there anymore, but God himself will show this person, you had a great family, but now all you need is me. And that to me speaks parallel universe. I don't think that's purgatory. I think technically life is all purgatory at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, like, if Jesus returned, let's say, because I'm going to tell you a story, because that's the only way to explain this. You wake up and nobody's around. You see this big cloud coming out of the sky. Jesus is there. How long were you sleeping, and where are you? Like, when you first wake up from a sleep, you don't really know where you are, who you are. And then you see Jesus coming from the cloud, and you go, oh, I know him. Oh, I recognize this. Your soul, testifies to the fact you're a saint. You've repented in his name. You lived your life in his name, and you go up with him in the clouds. We don't really know how all this ends. That's my whole point. This whole video is that's what I call suspension of time. So there's 3 different types. Okay. So I wanted to go through each type because they're complicated. So the first one I want to talk about was suspension of time. And suspension of time basically means that when Jesus said that he absolutely conquered death, that it's true, that there's actually a grace period, a time frame where, whether it's sanctification or if it's judgment, we won't feel the edit. And that's kind of the scary part, is if something hit the earth today or tomorrow, whenever, I really don't think we'd wake up tomorrow and go, oh man, something just hit the earth, or, oh, here's Jesus, there he is right now. There could be a time frame when he suspends time, when he allows us to live something out a little bit, and he will come at the same time regardless. Like, it's just like I'm showing you with the books. Like, time will end right on time, regardless of how long your life is. Do you see the edges of the books? They're all thick or thin, and that represented how much of your life you had, how long it was, but they all fit. When you take the angle upward, they all fit underneath the same box of the first book. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is the idea of God sitting outside of time. This is suspension of time. The book on the bottom that's extended, time still ends with Jesus coming back for all these different lives, for all these different groups. Maybe we're grouped up because he talks about us as in generations. He says, I will be with you to the end of the age, and this will be the last generation. He speaks in these very strange, bold terms, but I think what he's saying is, you're a chapter in the same book, living something out just slightly differently than the last chapter. And this is my next point. Is ebbs and flows of time. This is my second point. So ebbs and flows of time, and I realized this while watching Eric Ludy. He loves history, so he's a guy who just loves history. And he went through and he said, do you see all these different things that seem like the book of Revelation that happened throughout history? But you also notice, as people go throughout, Hitler and Nero and all these people, they go, but there's kind of this point when we realize not yet, right? So it kind of extends itself. It's like really bad times happen, but the stars don't fall. Really bad times happen, but the sun doesn't cease to shine. Really horrible times happen, but it's like we get to a certain point. Like, for example, 4 generations ago, your great-grandparents lived in the time of, let's say, Midas, as in the hand of Midas, the guy who had a gold hand, everything he touched turned to gold. Right. And when he was alive, and your grandparents were alive, they had this Midas type character who was a lot like the book they were reading that was a holy book, and they knew the ending. They knew that he'd come around eventually and have remorse for his greed. But as of right now, he's still very greedy, and as a matter of fact, he's also talking to this weird demon character who claims that everything he touches is going to be turned to gold. But then your grandparent dies or whatever, or that generation passes away, but doesn't really see the ending of that story. Your generation comes up, and then there's a Midas type character who's also very greedy, and he has the same conversation with a weird demon. I'm just doing this as an example, okay? And then the next thing happens where everything he does actually does turn to gold. You're like, that's a prophecy. In our holy book, we read this. But he doesn't really ever come back around to knowing it was wrong. And then the next generation comes. And then eventually that king too is like Midas. And then, but he gets to a point where he actually knows that what he did was wrong, and he feels remorseful for ever asking to touch everything and to be gold, everything to be gold. That's what I'm telling you, is that history is painting a picture, and God's saying, not yet. So what you're doing is you're getting ready for the next generation of people who are being sanctified in this dimension. You're saying, hey, it wasn't our generation, but things are getting real, real close. So watch out. Now, when you die, you could be falling asleep, right? And then when you wake up, just like anesthesia, time has passed, but you don't know it. And how much time do you have to realize there's Jesus and I'm in a different place, or I'm in the grave? Like, we don't understand time. We just don't. And nor, it's almost like our brains are not created to fully comprehend the whole of what time is and what he's created. It's like it's meant to captivate us. Like, fish don't comprehend what dimension you're in, and everything they're doing is slower. As they swim, they're swimming slower. The way in which they perceive the world is different. God is sitting in a place like we're the fish in the fishbowl, and he is observing us, and he created that dimension. So it's very scary. So I would like to say that I have gratitude and reverence toward a mighty God who gave us the Holy Spirit and the desire to want to know these mysteries. I mean, it's not weird that we ponder these things, consider these ideas. It makes me wonder if maybe in heaven we'll actually be allowed to have somewhat of a grasp, a little bit more than we have now, because why would we have the desire here? Maybe the desire here is a little bit like when a seed is in the ground and it kind of breaks through the surface of the soil. And when we finally go into heaven, we kind of come into fullness, and that's what I'm thinking about when I think about time. It feels like God has full control over this amazing, intricately woven tapestry of our life, timelines, this dimension that all these dimensions he holds in the palm of his hand like a cube. And we are allowed to see part of what he has a whole of in this place. And we kind of have, I don't know how much of a firm understanding, but I think in heaven we'll be able to actually confirm it. I think that's part of the problem, is that we have a lot of guessing happening here. But when you're walking with God, you can actually ask him. And I think that's where the breakthrough actually happens. I think where the full flourishing of who we were meant to be will really come into full existence at that time. Because we'll actually, think about people like Sir Isaac Newton, my favorite. I talk about him a lot. I know there's other people who have probably done cooler things, but I love the guy because of the fact that he studied theology as much as he studied science. He did go on a little bit on a weird path with the alchemy. I get that, but I also think that's what happens. I think this world, he's a very small example, just like the biblical stories. They're very small examples of bigger concepts, bigger things. Sometimes a cautionary tale, sometimes a part of us that's healthy, but of course we're always going to in this place have a part of us that is not. But that dies and we break through from this world into the next, and we get to fully come to full realization of what we were created to be. I just want to know how much of that happens here. And well, anyway, before this becomes a thinking out loud rant, this is Linda of Christ is King Forever. May God be with you.